Welcome to Within the Frame, where we bring the most pressing issues across the globe into focus. I'm Kim Mok-yeon. As Russia prepares to mark its 80th Victory Day, attention is shifting to a key absentee, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. Despite an increasingly tight military partnership with Moscow, including artillery shipments and reported troop deployments to the Ukraine front, Kim is known to be skipping the celebrations, fueling speculation over Pyongyang's diplomatic calculus. Meanwhile, tensions on the Korean Peninsula are climbing again. Hours before airtime, North Korea has launched a ballistic missile into the East Sea, its first test in 2 months. Now, this coincides with a string of public military appearances by Kim, from tank factories to drone facilities, suggesting an intensified focus on deterrence and projection. To help us break down these latest developments on the Korean Peninsula, we invite Kim Mok-yeon, Senior Research Fellow at the Institute for National Security Strategy, here in the studio with us. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
And also joining us from Washington, D.C. is Bruce Klinger, Senior Research Fellow at the Heritage Foundation. Great to see you.
Thank you for having me.
So, let's start a discussion with Dr. Go. So, like I've said, despite growing military cooperation between North Korea and Russia, Kim Jong-un is apparently skipping Russia's 80th Victory Day celebrations only by sending his ambassador. How would you interpret this latest decision?
So it's not really that surprising, because it's not the first time that Kim Jong-un has essentially resigned the invitation to attend the Victory Day parade in Russia. It has happened before, I believe in 2015 probably. So there's a rampant speculation that Kim Jong-un would be invited to Moscow. Was invited to Moscow, but he would show up, but ultimately didn't show up. And the reason given at the time, no official reason, but the speculation was that Kim Jong-un didn't want to share the spotlight with other attendees. There are other dignitaries there, especially Chinese President Xi Jinping. And obviously, from the Russians' point of view, Xi Jinping is a much more important, say, interlocutor, or say, as a strategic partner than North Korea, despite the fact that North Korea has provided key assistance to Russia in the ongoing war in Ukraine. So I believe one of the, the easiest answer or explanation behind Kim Jong-un's absence in the Victory Day parade in Moscow this time would be the fact that Kim Jong-un didn't want to share a spotlight with other global leaders. But on the other hand, though, I think it's surprising that it was just an ambassador who represented North Korea in the ceremony. Kim Jong-un could have sent, I say, like nominally the second in command. But there are many potential candidates for that in North Korea. But Kim Jong-un didn't do that. So it's possible that Kim Jong-un is essentially asking Russia to extend exclusive invitation and to have a bilateral meeting between him and President Vladimir Putin in the near future, which is from North Korea's point of view, would befit the stature that North Korea deserves right now after what North Korea has done for Russia.
Right, so the regime would prefer a one-on-one dialogue style. Now, what about Dr. Klinger? You know, according to South Korea's intelligence agency, as many as 15,000 North Korean troops have been deployed to support Russia in Ukraine, with around 600 deaths and over 4,000 wounded. Given these numbers, what do you make of North Korea's decision to, keep its troops out of the Victory Day parade?
I think it's really the same reason that Dr. Go pointed out for Kim Jong-un not attending, is North Korea didn't want its importance diluted by being just one of many nations and being overshadowed by larger, more important nations such as China. So the troops would have just been part of a long line of this parade. Even nations such as Vietnam are participating. So Kim wouldn't want the importance of North Korea to be overshadowed, to be diminished by just being included as one of many nations participating. Also, the focus of the Victory Day parade is the victory over Nazi Germany in World War II. So North Korea didn't play a part of that, so really it would just be an ancillary participation. So if it were more focused on Ukraine itself, then Russia might highlight North Korea's importance. And therefore, Kim Jong-un or even just the North Korean troops would have been given a much more prominent position in the parade. But I think Kim didn't want himself or his troops to be just seen as one of many and much less importance. Also, if images of the Victory Day parade were, appeared in North Korea, the citizens may see it as like, well, we thought North Korea was so important given the North Korean propaganda, and yet we seem to be a small, unimportant nation compared to others.
Right. So they would really want some special kind of treatment, considering their, close ties lately. Now, there are also reports, Dr. Go, that North Korea is considering granting relocation privileges to Pyongyang for the families of North Korean soldiers who were killed in Ukraine. Now, North Korea is known to be a state where, residency in the capital is a major social privilege. How could we read into this? Do you think it's a generous kind of compensation?
So I think this is essentially on a response on the part of the regime that is doing it because it cannot help it anymore. I can no longer essentially limit information flow into North Korea about North Korea's participation in the war and the fact that many North Korean soldiers are dying right now on foreign soil. And so clearly, I think it's an indirect indicator that there's clearly some, I would say discontent, but clearly a negative response among the North Korean public about the fact that there are also many casualties taking place fighting in a war that North Korea doesn't really have much stake in, except for the regime, obviously. So I think this is the reason why the North Korean regime is putting on the table this kind of incentive or like a compensation for the family members of the dead. But also, at the same time, I think it follows kind of naturally from the fact that the North Korean deaths, administrative casualties, are given the posthumous title of the heroes of the revolution. So it's one of the highest titles that are given to North Korean citizens. And given that title, it follows naturally that they will be granted other benefits. I think the regime essentially is now raising the ante here by sending the message to the larger public that their sacrifice will be rewarded and compensated with the highest possible compensation in North Korea right now, which is for at least for those family members who live outside of Pyongyang to move into the capital city where all the major amenities and social infrastructures are concentrated, and probably the best place to live in the country, relatively speaking.
So it definitely is kind of a reward and privilege for people living there. Now, what about Dr. Klinger? How do you think North Korea is managing its public perception of its role in the Ukraine war, especially with casualties mounting and foreign deployments becoming really undeniable?
Actually, North Korea wasn't mentioning its involvement in the Ukraine invasion, despite sending millions of artillery shells and dozens of missiles, and then the 12,000 or 15,000 troops. But as Dr. Go points out, is when information is still getting into North Korea, it seemed that they can no longer deny the truth of North Korea's involvement. So that's why one of the reasons we saw the joint announcement by Moscow and Pyongyang about North Korea's troop involvement. And so once they did admit that North Korean troops were involved and then dying, then they tried to make it a patriotic issue, sort of wrapping a flag around the issue of, highlighting that this was in support of its treaty ally, Russia, that it was not only defending against Ukraine, which they depicted as Ukraine invading Russia, but also sort of broader Western forces that were inimical to North Korean, Russian, and other interests. So then by now making it a very patriotic issue, any resistance or any criticism by the citizens against it would have dire consequences. So of course, given the very strict controls that the government has over the citizens, they can prevent or punish any kind of protests or demonstrations or even criticism. So, but now by depicting it as a very patriotic national goal, it makes it more difficult, I think, for people to protest against it.
So it really is a big thing to see, considering the number of, troops having been deployed. Now, let's also turn to the latest news, Dr. Go. Earlier today, North Korea has resumed its ballistic missile testing, which is known to be its first attempt in 2 months. And what do you make of the timing behind the latest launch?
So it seems to be like the timing for these launches are a little bit off because the United States military, also the South Korean military, have carried out a joint exercise only like a couple of weeks ago. So they usually time this kind of missile test with the joint exercises on the part of South Korea and the United States to send a message that they're developing all these missiles and even the nuclear weapons in response to the hostile posture on the part of the South Korea and the United States. So, but then this time, that's not that apparently it's not the main message, therefore the purpose of this test. So there's a speculation that the North Koreans are essentially testing out new missiles types. These are short-range missiles, the missiles that North Korea launched last time. But then right now, what the missiles that are being used by the Russians against Ukraine tend to be short-range ballistic missiles. So in the sense that if we are allowed to speculate in this case, if the North Koreans have received new weapons technology from Russia, then perhaps North Koreans are updating their missiles and they're exporting some of them back to Russia. So if that's in the case, they need a timing and place to test out the prototypes. And it's possible that North Koreans have done this in order to advance their technology.
Right, so it's just merely, it could be just merely a checking of their new technology input. Now, the latest launch, Dr. Klinger, also comes on the heels of a flurry of domestic military activity from the North Korean leader. Kim Jong-un apparently visited major arms production sites, calling for expanded artillery production. What kind of message do you think he's sending by focusing on domestic munitions over international diplomacy during this specific time around?
Well, as with any North Korean action, whether it's missile launches or Kim Jong-un's visits, we always try to figure out if it's a signal or just sort of normal activity. And if it's a signal, is it to the domestic audience, to the international audience? So with this, in a way, it's routine activity by Kim Jong-un. He frequently visits production factories for military, either missiles or conventional weapons or even nuclear weapons. But in this case, it's also linked directly or indirectly to North Korea's involvement in Russia's invasion of Ukraine. So Kim's message is the need for expanded production, particularly of artillery shells, to support its ally, Russia, in its invasion of Ukraine. And so he highlights the need, as he usually does when he visits military sites or training exercises or production facilities, the need to enhance, increase, expand North Korea's production, given the threat from either the United States, South Korea, or just more generally Western forces. So he's highlighting the need to expand production, which is already, we think, according to some reports, already 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, to expand its production of artillery and missiles. But it also, I think, indirectly highlights the need to defend against the United States and South Korea in the Indo-Pacific region.
Right, so again, emphasizing its self-reliance and readiness. Now, North Korea recently, Dr. Go, has also condemned a recent U.S. homeland missile defense drill in Alaska. And it says it legitimizes a preemptive nuclear strike against Pyongyang. How would you read into their latest decision?
Well, what the North Koreans are saying essentially is that the United States can neutralize the North Korea's intercontinental ballistic missiles by having a very effective missile defense system. So, in a scenario in which we're talking about this from the perspective of the North Korea. So, if the United States, say, launches a missile towards North Korea, and North Korea tries to respond by launching its own missile against the United States, because North Korea doesn't have an effective missile defense system, they'll be attacked and successfully by the United States, but then the North Korea's missile will be intercepted by the American missile defense system, therefore making the North Korea's missile capability essentially void and null. So North Korea is pointing out that this essentially makes the whole situation more unstable, which is clearly a propaganda move on the part of North Korea, because North Korea is right now pushing a narrative in view of a potential negotiation with the United States. North Korea wants to tell the United States that, first of all, the nuclearization of their country is off the table, it's no longer possible. So only the discussion agenda that they will consider will be for the United States to accept North Korea as a nuclear state. But in exchange, North Korea is going to ask again the United States to enter into some sort of a arms control negotiation, meaning that the end product of the negotiation, so hypothetically speaking, will be for North Korea and the United States to enter into an agreement. There are many types of agreements here, but then one of the essential agreements would be to limit both sides' capability to attack each other. So North Korea is essentially looking far ahead. So it's pre-positioning their negotiation points before an actual negotiation happens, so that they can have an initiative and essentially put on the United States on the defensive if negotiation happens sometimes in the future. So, and then North Koreans are doing this repeatedly to drive this point on the American side. So this is a political posturing on the part of North Korea, taking a long view. So it doesn't have to be grounded on reality. It's more about the North Korea preparing for negotiations. So that's something that we have to consider in interpreting this kind of statements coming out of the Pyongyang.
Right, so a strategic message indeed from their latest sentences. Now, the U.S. Treasury, Dr. Klinger, has blacklisted Cambodia's Hyun Group for laundering billions in illicit funds, including over $50 million traced back to North Korean cyber attacks. What does this say about the role of cybercrime in sustaining the regime's which is under sanctions, and how much do you think should we be concerned about this?
Should be very concerned, because cybercrime is a major component of North Korea's strategy to evade or to reduce the impact of international sanctions imposed on it for various violations of UN resolutions or international law. In the past, many were skeptical that a small nation like North Korea could really be involved or effective in cyber hacking or cyber espionage or later cyber crime. Those days are gone. Everyone realizes that North Korea is, as U.S. intelligence says, in the top 4 nations of the world in its capability for cyber activity and cyber attacks. And cyber crime is really an update of what its previous involvement in crime activity, but it's much more profitable, much less risky than its previous criminal endeavors of counterfeiting currency or smuggling. So it's always hard to estimate the level of criminal activity, but usually it seems to be about $1 billion a year, which is a very substantial level compared to North Korea's overall foreign trade or even its GDP. Just this year, North Korea was responsible in a single cyber crime attack of gaining $1.5 billion. And that certainly enables North Korea to weather the impact of sanctions, along with all of the benefits that it's getting from Russia, food and fuel and funding. So unfortunately, the international community, including the United States, has not sufficiently enforced UN resolutions or international law, and that's enabled North Korean entities in involvement with foreign entities to evade the sanctions.
Right. So it's a very concerning situation. It really shows how far Pyongyang's cyber operations have reached and how critical the money they earned has become. Now to our last question, Dr. Go. The UN Security Council convened a meeting on May 7th to discuss, of course, North Korea's ongoing activities and also its cooperation with Russia. Now, back in 2024, Russia has vetoed the renewal of the panel of experts mandate in the UNSC, effectively shutting it down. Could you tell us how has this affected the UN's ability to track and respond to North Korea's breaches?
Well, so there are two components or two committees when it comes to sanctions, United Nations sanctions enforcement on North Korea. There's the 1874 committee, also called the panel of experts, and which was essentially dismantled by Russian veto last year. But there's also a sanctions committee called the 1718 committee. So 1718 committee, the sanctions committee, which is composed of the members of the Security Council, still remains, still effective, still working. And this is actually the committee that convened this meeting that took place yesterday. So this committee continues to work. What's lacking, though, is the public side of this work, meaning the panel of experts work. And oftentimes what the panel, members of the panel of experts did for the sanctions committee was to gather evidence of North Korea's sanctions evasion, as well as urging the member states to implement the Security Council resolutions, as well as ensure that essentially the sanctions by the United Nations were implemented effectively. But then in practice what happened was that these members of the panel relied on the member states, especially the like-minded states that focused on sanctions on North Korea for intelligence, as well as enforcement. So in that sense, I think the member states were doing the panel's work for a long time. So the panels had become more of a, I would say, investigative arm, which could be done outside of the United Nations just as effectively. But so what happened, though? So the work in terms of quality remains very high, even without the panel of experts. But what's lacking, though, is the legitimacy of these findings. So even before, if these findings by the members of the panel had this legitimacy granted by the United Nations, that's gone. So the findings that we find, also read in the major news media or from the news broadcast, are no longer carry this weight or like the value that over like consensus that even countries like China and Russia essentially implicitly had agreed to. So now all these major findings by United States government, South Korea, Japan, Australia are seen as biased. So this is the biggest downside of the dismantlement of the panel of experts. But when it comes to tracking and analyzing and enforcing sanctions, that's actually still ongoing.
But even though these sanctions are ongoing, they seem to continue to breach the North Korean part.
Well, that's always happened, but it's ongoing more. It's more like a whack-a-mole kind of game, and whack-a-mole game kind of game is like endless, and then this is continuing. But then overall, I believe I'm optimistic about this, and the sanctions are essentially act as a weight, dead weight on the North Korean economy. So the North Koreans are always fighting this, and this is one of the reasons why North Koreans are putting sanction relief, one of the conditions for the negotiations.
Right, so it still gives them a lot of pressure.
Exactly.
All right, we will have to conclude our program and end our discussion right here for tonight. Thank you so much for your insights and for your time, Dr. Go.
My pleasure.
And of course, Dr. Klinger, we appreciate it.
Thank you.
Now, that'll be all from us from Within the Frame. Be sure to tune in again next time as we continue to explore the stories that matter. Till then, stay informed and engaged.